family named we had a family named Johnson, which may make sense to you, since they founded Fidelity. We're just a small little firm in Boston, and want to go into the behemoth it is. It's a great name, one that I have a lot of respect for on a professional basis. But at my age, I can't remember what I did yesterday, let alone in the '60s, which is probably good for everybody. Jason, why don't you begin, and we'll try and act as nice as we can.
Jason, before you start, I'm just going to add to Len's comments. So Jason and I recently participated on a panel discussion about retirement readiness across generations at the CBA annual conference. And after hearing Jason's remarks as part of that panel, I suggested to Michael that this would be helpful for our board to have a broader and deeper context for what we discuss around our RPB table. And Jason, as you might have seen, he's the head of global and workplace thought leadership at Fidelity. He's been with Fidelity for quite some time. And Katie Riley, she's a director of strategic workplace thought leadership as well. So just wanted to give you a little bit of context, and
thank you.
It's all yours.
Great, thanks. And nice to virtually meet everyone, and appreciate the time today. Just as we get started, so I think we're scheduled till 10:30, is that right? So
yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. But happy to take questions as we go through this. I will share my screen here, and at least I will attempt to. I've got an interesting setup at the office here, so let's see if I can present. And wait 1 second, and let's see one more second. Oh, hey, I think I was sharing a second ago, and then it went away. One more second. Do you see it? Do you see my screen?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Okay, but I want to just take this. Okay, great. So, so thank you, Stephanie and Michael, for the opportunity to join. And just as some background, Katie and I are here. We work together. What thought leadership is, we have a fun job where we get to really, Fidelity is the largest player when it comes to retirement benefits in the US, and we have this really broad set of data that we get to lean into, learn from, look for trends. And we also have teams of behavioral scientists, financial engineers, AI experts, a ton of capabilities within our organization that we can leverage, and we try to bring all that together to then present to people like you in forums like this, and to the media and others to share what we're finding. And so that's what we're going to be doing today. As a background, we've got about 40 million Americans that we're serving. So most working Americans we will have a connection with at some point in their lives. We've got over 20,000 businesses that we're helping with their benefits programs, and we also work with thousands of financial advisors. So we've got a broad footprint. What we're going to do today, and we might shorten up a couple of these sections, is really to hit on 4 key areas, which is really quickly share with you some of the key themes that we're hearing across the US employment market. Then we'll go into some of that data that I was just referencing, where we'll talk about some trends with our corporate plans, our 401k market, as well as the 403b market, or sort of mission-driven organizations, and what we're seeing there. And then we'll do a deeper dive into Gen Z and sort of generations overall. And then we'll also share some of the behavioral work and behavioral research that we're doing. And so Katie and team have recently done some work related to why some employees thrive in workforces and versus why some don't, and how benefits programs and broader benefit strategies can influence that. So I think there's some interesting findings there that we'll share. We've allotted for some time at the end for Q&A, but I'll also pause periodically. So if you have stuff, feel free to either raise your hand virtually or speak up, and we'll go from there. Make sense? Yeah, so I'll take that as a yes, and we'll dive right into it.
Well.
Okay, great. So at a high level, I think when we take a look at the U.S. workforce, there are really like, it's hard to summarize such a large thing, but I'd say there are four real major trends that we're seeing, which is one is employers continue to be and increasingly are focused on employee well-being or concerned about well-being. Back in 2019, before the pandemic, the World Health Organization talked about the concept of burnout as being a workplace phenomena. That was before the pandemic. That was before everything else happened. Like people were already burning out then, and it's only become more. And so what we're finding now with our employers, it's not a question of, hey, how do I prevent my employees from getting burned out? Like people are burned out. How do we help them? How do we get them past that? And what that means for us is there's actually a lot of requests from some of our largest employers for broader support around mental health, total well-being, because finances and health are very tightly linked, right? So we're seeing a lot of interest there from employers on doing more on that front. We're also finding that the workforce is going through a fundamental shift right now. If you take a look at Gen Z, which is the youngest generation in the workforce right now, 48% of them are non-white. And so that brings a different level of diversity than we've ever seen in the workforce. But they're also diverse across other elements such as sexual orientation, gender identity, country of origin, other factors. So it's a much different population that we've seen, but it's one that is expecting more personalization because they're accustomed to everything being personalized everywhere for them. And so what that means when it comes to the workforce management and benefits is like we have to think differently. It's not just a one size fits all approach anymore. Like how do you engage those people differently? Um, everyone's talking about artificial intelligence, it seems, and so what we find interesting here is many of our employers talk about how I've got all this complexity, and AI is great at complexity. AI can be the solution to help me with some of those problems that I mentioned. And so AI is becoming a panacea for many things, but then the employees are saying, well, wait a minute, is this going to eliminate my job? What does that mean for me? So there's an interesting tension there that we're seeing. And then lastly, what we hear from our employers and benefits leaders and many of our is just like the pace of change is overwhelming, and there are so many external factors that are impacting the workplace and the workforce, and that can be overwhelming for them. I think there's also a lot of concern by some as we're going into an election year, and what does that mean in the workforce, and when it comes to things like civility in the workforce, right? So we're seeing a lot of sensitivity there as well. So that's just the macro high level story of what we're seeing. But now we'll share some of the data that we can pull from our platform. I'm going to share a lot of data. I'm just going to hit some of the key themes at a high level, but happy to go deeper. So overall, when we take a look at like how are Americans doing, what we have here is we have data that shows our corporate plans, our 401ks, and then our 403bs, which are our mission-driven, tax-exempt organizations. And then Michael supplied the data for the RPB plan specifically, so you can compare and contrast. So overall, the total savings rate, and you can see that the RPB plan is doing better than the averages for the 401k and 403b markets, is 15.6% for the RPB plan, whereas you can see that the values for the corporate and the tax exempt. This is an all-in, so this includes anything that the individual is saving plus any company matches or company contributions. In terms of balances, you can see the average balances here. We typically see corporate plans have higher balances than some of our tax exempt markets. The RPB plan is much higher, but that's also likely a factor due to my hunch here is it's more about like demographics and tenure, right? So you have very long tenure you probably have an older population overall, which that then is going to influence total balances. We've got some detail later where you see like younger generations will dramatically bring down the average balances. So then if we go to the next page, on this page, really want to talk about three concepts that have been really helpful and in the U.S. system. Some of you may be very familiar with these. I don't know. Maybe all of you are. So apologies if it's rudimentary. But you know, at a macro level, where the U.S. system has seen a lot of success over the last few years, really starting with the you know, some of the changes in going back to 2006 related to some of the legislation is really moving towards auto solutions. And so we now have a system that has auto enrollment as an option, as well as auto increase programs and auto allocation programs. Now, the way that the US system is set up is there's always employer and employee choice with all of these. Employers can choose to offer automatic solutions, and then employees can choose to participate or not participate. But that's been a very successful trend that we've seen steady adoption with, and that has driven some really really positive behaviors overall. So what we're seeing is most 401k and 403b are offering auto enrollment. So when you start working, an employee is defaulted into a solution where they are saving a percentage of their income automatically into their retirement plan. A large number of employers, you can see in the center column, also offer auto increase programs. And so what that does is that pairs with an auto enrollment program where when someone starts working, you might start them at a low automatic savings rate, and then for every year that they're working, you might ratchet that up 1% up to a ceiling amount. We haven't seen quite that same adoption yet in the 403b plans. But you know, there's often a lag between the corporate and the tax exempt market. And then the last area is this concept of auto allocation. So when people are defaulted into retirement savings, they are then often defaulted into a target date fund. So this is a fund that, you know, based on your age, will then manage your mix of stocks, bonds, and cash as you age over the course and as you sort of move closer to retirement. So, you know, in the past, before we had that, people would often just be all in cash and not have that money invested in the marketplace. And so then they wouldn't be keeping up with inflation or any of the other things. So we see that these target date funds do really well here. And most people that are signed up for these plans stay in those plans. And then, so, you know, I think one of the things in talking to Michael about this is, you know, he was just highlighting this note at the bottom is, so RPB is a multi-employer plan. And so because of that, RPB doesn't have control or have all of the stats on the member congregations, but there is this challenge of trying to encourage and enforce a lot of these activities and sort of set these as best practices. And I believe that there's you know, some investigation happening into a white paper, some other work to try to drive that positive behavior. And then you know, the other fact that, just to call it on this slide, is continuous employment supports retirement readiness, right? So if you take a look at employees who have stayed with their employer, I think this is for 7 years or more, that drives really positive behaviors. For them, we see that their savings are up, and that their balances are up. And this is so the savings are up by 40%, their balances are up about double. This is looking just at faith-based participants, so similar organizations, you know, in terms of sort of mandate as RPB. So, so that's some of the high level data. Now let's take a look at some of these generational cuts and some of the differences here. Before we go into some of the data around that, just talking about some of the major generations that we're going to be looking at in this workforce and how they're different. So obviously, you can see that boomers are typically 1946 to 1964. When you look at this data, different organizations might change some of the years, plus or minus 1 year. So it's not a precise measure, but it's directional. But boomers are typically viewed as work-centric, conservative, competitive. Gen Xers, I'm in that group, so we typically just ignore them. And so that's my personal bone to pick. But really here, it's more about work-life balance, independent, more materialistic. Gen Y or the millennials are more questioning, flexible, and growth-oriented. And then with Gen Z, they're more communicative, open, diverse, and collaborative. Currently, if you go back, this was pulling from some 2020 data, so it's a couple of years old. The Gen Z was 5% of the workforce. That's anticipated to be north of 20% by 2025, obviously because they're aging into the workforce, right? So as they graduate college and move into the workforce, they are increasingly becoming a force that we need to be aware of. And so just taking a look at some of those data points that I was mentioning earlier and looking at it from a generational standpoint, here are some of the trends. Overall, you can see that savings rate increases as workers get older. And so this is just looking at the employee value. So without the match. And then so typically a Gen Z is saving on average around 5.7%. So a couple of things there. So young workers are saving, right? I think sometimes we hear people talk in the media that, well, the younger generations aren't saving at all. That's not true. And, at least from what our data suggests, and we have over 1 million Gen Z customers on our platform, we see that they are saving. We do see that also workplaces are where many of the younger workers really start and have a majority of their savings. It's not till we move to the boomer populations that we see increased balances in what we call retail accounts, an IRA, a brokerage account, things like that, right? Because what ends up happening is most people do their savings in their workplace plan. If they change companies, they may roll over that money to a plan, to a retail account, and that's where you see some of those balances. Or when they retire, they often roll that money out. But we see younger workers are saving, but as retirement gets closer, as it becomes more real to people, that's when they can up their overall contribution rates. We see that the young workers are the highest users of those target date funds. Those are those auto allocate solutions I was mentioning earlier, and that's really because that's a newer feature. And so boomers, many of them didn't have that option as a starting point when they first started savings, and then they're managing their own money. But newer workers just tend to stay in that solution once they're in plan. So these auto features are very, very powerful. And then obviously you can see tenure changes. Younger workers are naturally going to have shorter tenure just because they haven't had as much time in the workforce. But then also when you're early in your career, you tend to move from employer to employer. And so I'll try to speed it up here to make sure I leave time for Katie. So closer look at Gen Z. This is a generation that has been shaped by crises. They have experienced a number of them, and so that has really influenced a lot of their behaviors, which we'll get to in a second. And they've also had a series of complex world events. So I'm a father of 2 Gen Zers, and I see it at home. Like, they are incredibly aware of what's happening in the world because of how much media they consume, or social media that they consume. They can't always process it all, but they're definitely aware of all of these factors. And so what that means is when it comes to Gen Zers in general, what they value is they value justice. They've seen all of those shifts in the world, and so they're unhappy about it, and they want justice. They are resilient. We sometimes say that the younger generations aren't as have it easier or softer than our generation. I think every generation of all time has said that. But what a lot of the data suggests is that they're actually quite resilient because they've seen so much change. They still remain optimistic despite that change. Money is not an end goal for them; it's a tool, right? So yes, they want money, but not for the scorecard of the balance, but in order to do the things that are important to them. This is a learning culture. They're always they have access to tools that always educate them. It's a self-help culture, do it yourself, where you can go on YouTube and figure out how to do anything. But they're also really concerned about debt. It's not uncommon for a worker. We hire someone, that's coming out of college. It's not uncommon to have 60, 70, $80,000 in student debt, right? So that's a real burden for people. And so what does that mean when it comes to their money? And so some of the themes that we see here is flexibility is really important to the younger workers. And we see this shift of previous generations were more about living to work. Like, I go to work, that's what I do, that's what I'm about. We've seen a shift, particularly because obviously that resonates in some way with someone in the room. But we're also seeing that it's more of a work to live culture. I want to live my life, and I want this money and I want my job and my money and my career to enable that as opposed to drive that. So that's why things like Roth IRAs actually are quite popular with this group. Yes, it's advantageous to them from a tax standpoint, but it gives them some more flexibility versus traditional IRAs. They are, while they're digital, they like tangible things, right? And so they also like things that are more present and nearer term. So one of the areas that we see a challenge with this audience is when you try to get them to save for retirement, it's, one of the quotes I heard from one of the workers is, so wait, you want me to work for 40 years to maybe take 10 years off when I'm 65, when I might have good health? No. I want to work for a couple of years and then travel and then do something else, right? So it's a fundamentally different stability is they are very sensitive to risk, actually. Younger workers should be able to take on more risk in their portfolios, but because of all of that upheaval that they've seen, what the data suggests is they're actually more conservative on average. Again, these are broad strokes on average. And then they are opportunistic. And they have different definitions on what an investment may be, right? So to some workers, a sneaker collection is their way of making a bunch of money. I thought it was interesting. I asked my daughters around passive income. They knew all about passive income and how to use that as a strategy. They're years from affording their first home, but they already have this plan on how to think about generating passive income because TikTok showed them this and it became a trend. And then most importantly, and I think what's interesting here is younger generations are really looking for purpose. And with an organization such as RPB, which is obviously so purpose driven, I just think that there's an interesting, combination there. People don't want to just have a job. They want to make society better and to do things. And so that we even see that in things like, we do see entrepreneurship with like this creator economy, but it's not about being an entrepreneur. It's about doing something meaningful primarily, whereas previous generations may have been more about the opportunity. So I'll skip this for right now, but the point we're talking about this is there was the ask to talk about Gen Z overall, but really the other takeaway that we're seeing is Gen Z is influencing other cultures. Older generations are looking at Gen Zs and saying, hey, you know what, they are standing up for themselves and it's working. Like maybe I should be doing that. And we're seeing that many of the workers are shifting to that work to live versus live to work type of view. And for all workers, having automatic, simple solutions are really important, just because that's really what drives positive behaviors. But with that, I'll have Katie dive in and talk about some of the work that we've done around thriving workplaces.
Thanks, Jason. Hi, everyone. Very happy to chat with you for a few minutes about some recent research that we've completed at Fidelity that we've called our Thriving Workforces research. Essentially, we wanted to understand the state of the workforce, how folks are really doing, and as Jason mentioned earlier, kind of what, if any, elements of the benefits package and employee experience are driving employees' ability to thrive at work. So our first step in this research was actually to go out to employers. We asked just over 1,000 employers, folks who were in decision-making and benefit-making capacities, to let us know how they thought their employees were doing. Over the last 6 months, we asked about how satisfied they felt their workforce was, as well as how they perceived their employee performance over the last 6 months. And what you see here is that employers have a really positive perception of how the workforce is doing. So 88% saying that their workforce was very or extremely satisfied with their jobs. 86% saying that they've seen very good or excellent performance from their employees over the last 6 months. So this is great. Employers are feeling like their workforce is doing really well. But unfortunately, we're seeing a little bit of a misalignment when we went out to the 5,600 employees and asked for their input on these same areas. So again, we're looking at the workforce in two different categories.
There's a lot of acceptance here.
I'm sorry.
There was a lot of acceptance in the room, Katie.
Okay. Great. So we are categorizing in this research the workforce into thriving and what we're calling surviving buckets. Thriving, essentially by our research, is saying that folks have top 2 box satisfaction, very or excellent satisfaction, top 2 box effort that they're putting in, and then are rarely or never experiencing burnout, so bottom 2 box for that burnout scale. So we found that only 1 in 6, or just less than 1 in 6 employees fit into this thriving category. Everyone else, the other almost 84%, are experiencing either some level of burnout, they're not putting in as much effort, they're not feeling as satisfied, or some combination of the above. So let's take a look at kind of what we heard from them. We heard that 77% of workers are putting in high effort, so top 2 box effort. That's great. But as Jason mentioned earlier, burnout is a big point of conversation around the workforce, and we're seeing that 49% are experiencing burnout regularly. So what you see here is the 51%, happily, we're still just over that 50% mark, but 51% were never or rarely experiencing burnout in this body of research. What I think is worrisome here is that only 47% of the workforce is saying that they are very or extremely satisfied with their job, which, if you recall from the previous slide, employers thought that number was going to be close to 88%. So definitely seeing some misalignment there around satisfaction. So these 3 elements together give us this thriving score of 16% for the overall workforce. But why does it matter if we have a thriving workforce? Not everyone can thrive. We know that that is a goal for some other world that we will never probably get to. But let's talk about why it matters. So we know that employees who thrive, from our research, both this body of research as well as much that we've done in the past, we know that folks who are doing well at work have higher loyalty toward their employer. They want to stick around. So about 50% of them who fell into this thriving category said that they had very high loyalty, compared to under 20%, so 16% of those who are in the surviving category. We also know that they are reporting higher job performance. So more, or just about half of them, are saying that their job performance is excellent, top box, excellent. Whereas just 1 in 5 who are surviving are saying that they are performing excellently at work right now. And we know that talent strategy right now, retention and attraction of talent, is a top priority for almost all employers. One thing that this speaks to in terms of a thriving workforce is being able to hold on to your top performers. So there is very strong retention among thrivers. So only 17% of survivors say that they are thinking about leaving their job or likely to leave their job in the next 6 months. The large majority of the workforce, the thriving workforce, is happy where they are. They're putting in effort. They're rarely feeling burnout, and they want to stay where they are. 3% of thrivers, oh, I'm sorry, I mixed this number up. 3% of thrivers say they're likely to leave their job versus the 17.7% of survivors who say that they are potentially looking to leave their job in the next 6 months. So huge difference here. 97% of thrivers say that they are happy where they are and they want to continue working with their employer. If we skip, thank you, to the next slide, I want you to take a look at the benefits that we asked about when we went out and surveyed these employees. We were trying to get, as I mentioned earlier, an understanding of which of these components of the benefits experience might have an outsized impact on someone's ability to thrive. And so we asked employees to rank this list. There were just over 20 benefits. And tell us what mattered most to them when they were thinking about taking or keeping their job. So to give us a rank of how important these areas are, these different benefits are when they're thinking about staying in their job or taking a new one. And just last year, Fidelity expanded our definition of benefits to include tangible and intangible aspects of the benefit experience. So things like retirement plans, health coverage, but also things like connection to your manager, your colleagues, feeling a sense of inclusion at work, feeling a sense of autonomy over the work you do, having paid sick leave and stability in your work. So we're asking about this very broad range of what we consider benefits. And what we saw from the workforce is that number one value is in balance-oriented benefits. Calling back to what Jason was mentioning about the change to this live to work and work to live culture. I think this really speaks to that shift where folks are looking for the opportunity to balance work and life, to take the time off when they need it, to feel that their job is stable and secure, but also be able to flex when it's necessary to put their lives first. We saw that that came out above benefits, core benefits like health insurance and retirement plan. That came out above compensation. Obviously, these two are foundational components of the employee experience. They're not negotiable aspects. They want competitive benefits, competitive compensation, but folks are willing to flex that a little bit to have the balance that they need. And then we also asked about these categories of psychological needs and targeted benefits. I'll skip the targeted benefits for now. The numbers were low because they are very specific to certain populations like new parents or students who are paying off student debt. But one really interesting insight, if we skip to the next page, that we saw is what differentiates thrivers from survivors. And it's in this category of psychological needs. So asking again about how important it is that they have these benefits when they're thinking about keeping a job or changing jobs, there was a 12% difference in thrivers when they ranked psychological needs. So psychological needs are things like, and Jason, if you want to skip right to the next one, psychological needs are categorized as autonomy. So it's the ability to choose to an extent how, where, and when you work and the type of work that you're doing. It's connection, so feeling a connection to your colleagues, to your leadership, and a sense of inclusion in your workplace. Competence is this ability to grow, to use your skill sets, and to continue growing within your organization. And this sense of purpose, so feeling that your work is meaningful and that you're adding value, and also feeling that your personal goals and values align with that of your employer. So we saw there was a 12% difference, again, in folks who were thriving, who ranked these 4 areas of psychological needs as incredibly important for them when thinking about taking a job or staying in their job, which I think speaks to the idea that some of these intangible aspects of the benefits experience are driving folks' experience in the workforce just as much as their ability to save for retirement or to access healthcare. And that takes us to our next slide, which is what we're asking employers to think a little bit differently about. We have seen historically that employers say they are measuring effectiveness of their benefits through enrollment and utilization. But we know, again, that so many of these benefits are not tangible. They don't necessarily have an enrollment rate associated with them. They might just be about connection to your leadership team, connection to your colleagues, and ability to grow in your workforce. And we see that all of those aspects, those intangible aspects of the benefits experience, play directly into talent strategy. They play into retention and recruitment. So we are asking employers to think a little bit differently about how we're measuring benefits, and to move from those traditional metrics of enrollment and utilization, and start thinking about using things like talent recruitment, reducing turnover, and reducing absenteeism, because we see that these intangible benefits have a direct link to those same outcomes.
Okay, so thanks, Katie. And I know we're at time, but just to close out on this slide, I'd say to summarize what we were just talking about, that hopefully some of the takeaways here are: it's important to make sure that you understand what matters most to your workforce across all generations. The generations are different. They do influence each other also, but really understanding what's important there. As Katie was saying, broadening your definition of benefits to focus on what is most valuable to them, and then offering a mix of benefits that is aligned to your strategic goals. So again, your goal is not, as a business or as an organization, is typically not to drive enrollment, but to drive attraction, retention, and engagement, and encouraging people to measure against those. And then also broadening the help that you're providing employees. So broader financial wellness programs are very much in desire, particularly by younger workers who don't have that same view towards retirement yet and have more near-term needs. And then lastly, we talked about measuring what making sure that you're measuring the right metrics for your organization. So I think we went 2 minutes over. Happy to ask questions if there's still time, answer questions if there's time on the agenda, but thank you.
Outstanding. If we could get the screen up, I'd like to find out if anybody on the screen first has questions. If not, I'll ask here in the room. I don't see any. Have I missed something? Okay.
Len,
Yes.
after the questions, then I just want to add something about what the work we're doing as it relates to this.
Please.
Not right now. I'll go for the questions.
After, okay. All right.
Jason,
Around the table, I'm just looking at this. I said, we've got what I would call professionals across the board, from rabbi to administrator to educator. And I'm just wondering, I'm trying to relate to some of this. I wish a lot of our congregations were here because it relates directly to the people we're talking about, as opposed to the employees related to the employer. This is more like the employer relating to the employee. So I don't want to get off on a wrong track here, but if I'm on the right track, obviously I'd sure like a copy of the slides and like to pursue this to the next slide. Ellen, you had a comment?
Same thing, copy the next slide.
Okay, Rabbi Friedman?
I wonder, Katie, if you could address what seems to me to be something of a paradox, and that is the importance of connection that was on the slide, the most immediate slide. It's one of the four. I don't remember all of the four, but yeah, that's yeah, that one. To some degree, it seems to me there's often a tension in terms of what I'm hearing from younger folks in their workplaces between autonomy and connection. That is, I know my 40-year-old son, probably his greatest goal in one sense is to see how infrequently he can go into the workplace to do his work. So, if he's sitting in his home, even though he's doing his work, he's certainly not connecting at that point. And, I don't think that he's unique. I think that there are tons of people who are looking for that kind of situation, and, among that population. I'm wondering how, those contradictory factors wind up working again with and against one another.
I think that's a great question. And I think you're right. Your son is probably not an outlier. There are many employees who are hoping for the same thing. I think it's a delicate balance to strike because we know that teams who are collaborating, who are working together and building a foundation and some strength together as a team have much higher performance, that individually folks are more satisfied with their work and they perform at higher levels when they're working in collaboration with teammates and with other thought partners. So connection doesn't always have to be face to face. It doesn't always have to be having a conversation about non-work topics. It can be connecting with a colleague over a challenge that you're kind of mutually trying to solve. But for others who are seeking connection, sometimes it's just allowing opportunity for folks to come together. It's hosting affinity group opportunities for them to come together and share in a common passion or purpose. It's giving folks the opportunity maybe after work to drop by a social hour and ensure that they are kind of meeting new people or strengthening their relationships. So it's about offering those opportunities, but not necessarily forcing people into them, which I think has an adverse effect. But just one other thing that I'd like to add, there's a lot of research now that is showing that there are high levels of isolation at work. Folks are feeling really isolated, even in their attempts to connect, they're still feeling like they're kind of on the outside. And I think this is a really important issue to be thinking about, again, how we can build intentional gatherings into our workforce, whether it is in a hybrid workforce or an in-person or remote workforce. We've got to find different strategies to allow people to come together for those who are looking for it, because isolation is running rampant right now and it has huge effects on folks' well-being across the board. So again, a delicate balance to strike. I think it's very nuanced based on the work that folks are doing, their type of job, but it's about offering those opportunities for folks to take up when they want it, but not forcing them into it, which again can have adverse effects.
You know, I find that very interesting. I hope a related note. I have a son who's a trader, and without getting into all of it, they're working from home now and almost refuse to come into the office. However, not just him, but he was telling me about one institution, faced with what Ron has just been talking about. They solved by putting in a fantasy football league in the office. And I'm gonna tell you, everybody is bonding. So I guess there's different ways to do it. By the way, my birthday was not on that screen, but I'm not taking offense. Is there any other comment here at the table?
Len, it's Daryl on, you don't want to have me turn on my camera. I will just say that as I think some of you are aware that I'm chair of an organization called Leading Edge, which does research in exactly this area for the Jewish not-for-profit sector. The Fidelity results are fascinating to me because they very much parallel what we see in our own sector. And if at any time you all want to look at how we see the Jewish not-for-profit sector, particularly on congregations, I'd be happy to arrange a presentation. We survey
That'd be great.
over 800 Jewish organizations last year, over 18,000 participants. So the Fidelity results and the importance of these psychological factors in helping folks feel satisfied or thrive in their workplace really key. So it was fascinating. Thank you.
Ron, and then Ron Mason, but Ron Friedman first.
Oh, okay. Since you mentioned kids, I have two kids who work in synagogues. One is a rabbi and one is an educator. Their jobs actually are to help people build connections and relationships and have purpose and meaning in their lives. And I understand that this is about the personal experience of the person in the workplace. Yet we are talking here, I think we're talking about people who are not only having a personal experience, but in fact, their jobs are to cause people to have this kind of positive experience in their congregations, in their schools, in their Hillel. So I think that what Daryl is offering will be quite useful to us because this is happening, I think, in two areas, right? So my son may in fact be very satisfied and thriving in his job, building connections for other people. What kind of connections is he in fact building for himself in the workplace? And the workplace might have a half a dozen people in it, a synagogue, on a day-to-day basis. And they go there every day. They're not isolated. They go there every day and they see each other. So I just want to throw in this idea that for people who work in the areas that we're concerned about, it's not only about the personal experience of these things, but in fact, these define large components of the job that they're there to do.
I think that's such a great point. And I think just to underscore something that Katie was touching on is like that isolation is no longer a geographic phenomena, right? So with technology, particularly with the younger generations, they are placeless. They are digital. They are connected. I look at my daughter's friends. She's got a friends network that's global, and she's a teenager, right? And so I can go off many tangents there, but it's super interesting. They're connected in a different way. They don't see each other physically as much, but they're connected differently. And so that's also, I think, an opportunity, even if you've got these, disparate or sort of more remote synagogue locations, there are ways of using technology and other capabilities to help drive connection between sister organizations. And, so things are a little different. Oh, it looks like there's a question on the screen.
Yeah, Ron. Oh, let me get Ron then I want to get on the screen. Go ahead, Ron.
So this is really as much a question for this table and for the RPB staff. It seems to me, as this presentation, this is a great presentation as it was being made. I mean, our staffs of the various congregations, need this and can profit by it much more than we can, I think. I mean, our thinking about it or our ability to affect it only goes so far, but within congregations, the clergy and the educational staff, and particularly the administrators, a consciousness of this with regard to the various workplaces that are represented by folks in the RPB would so benefit, I think, from this presentation. That doesn't mean we can get them on screen, but that's really the question I want to raise, more globally. I mean, first, would Fidelity do that again? And that's number one. And number two, do you think we could get congregations to tune into it?
I don't know, Ron, if that's a question for our board to just discuss. And I think, obviously, we're not going to get it done in 2 minutes, but I would hope that.
And I will say that Leading Edge's data is very similar and it's particular to Jewish community, and I'd be happy to make that happen. And if Missy Johnson's in the room, she also is a big user of the Leading Edge data. It very much follows what Fidelity just presented and is specific to Jewish.
Len, it's Michael
Yes.
here.
Yeah, Michael.
I'm just looking at the clock. We probably should wrap up this conversation, but I do want to let Stephanie wrap up with just to try to explain how this is relevant for us, right? I mean,
Okay.
look, there's a lot of good stuff in there.
We have to have
and-
one more quick question and then Stephanie will wrap it up.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think my question will probably be what Stephanie's going to address. Jason, we've been enrolling a lot of early childhood educators, among others, who are mostly fairly young and fairly low paid employees. From what you're saying, they're probably mostly survivors rather than thrivers. Is there anything we can do in regard to education or outreach to make them feel that pensions are more important?
Yeah. So great question. And you could talk forever just on that. So you're not alone in that challenge. I say we see this across a lot of industries. Even when you look at like big tech companies, like some of the biggest companies in the country, they have this bifurcation of workers, right? They'll often have their highly comped, highly paid tech engineers, and then their frontline workers. and their frontline workers tend to be lower comped, often deskless, don't have access to a lot of this education and tools, don't have the time. And so there's a big struggle, there's a big divide for many of them. And we often see lower usage from the people who need those benefits most. So one is in terms of helping them, that's where these auto enrollment programs really are impactful. It's a way to get people started in small increments. Because they are often extra stretched in their time, they might be having multiple jobs that they're working at one time. The auto solution is something that sort of takes inertia and uses it positively for them. And then broader financial wellness programs overall, like helping them understand budgeting, student debt issues. Some of those capabilities, those are often a good place to start as well. But again, there's a lot of different things we could do. That's just sort of the high level answer, just being cognizant of time.
I
But
appreciate that. Thank you very much. Stephanie, you want to take us home, please?
Yeah, just quickly, obviously, this is not a simple solution to implement for us in terms of making sure we can cover everything that Jason and Katie brought up today. But one thing we are definitely doing is with financial wellness, we will be segmenting our messaging among to like age as well as financial persona based upon how Fidelity tags our customer base, our participant base. And we've identified that in our plan, we have roughly 40 folks who are considered Gen Z. So that's a fairly manageable number right now. And we want to actually use this time period when we're launching our financial wellness initiative to tap into them in a much more intentional way, come up with some programming for them, learn from them, see what they want from us. And that will be some kind of periodic touch point. We've yet to put the details around this, but as we keep you abreast of what we're doing with financial wellness, you'll see our messaging and you'll see the different segmented initiatives that we're going to be going after. Additionally, as Michael noted earlier, we are a multi-employer plan. As you all know, we can't force employers to do things, but we can educate them and provide thought leadership in that way. So to the extent we're able to do that, we will work to do that.
And I'll just add to that point about the employers. We see it as critically important and part of our base strategy to deepen our relationships with our employers, right? I mean, they're out there working directly day in and day out with our participants, and the more resources we can provide, ultimately the better off everybody will be. So it's definitely, while we clearly have a direct connection to our participants and we're going to communicate directly, we certainly want to try our best to engage, and we have already done a lot of this with our employers as well. We see this as a win-win-win across the board. So stay tuned for more about that.
Now to go to our various constituencies and ask for an update. Look, we're hearing all kinds of rumblings out there as to whether people are happy or not. So let's let it happen. Yes, Jill.
Hi, can I ask to go first, because I am gonna have. to
Please,
leave
I know,
early.
I did this because I know you have to leave.
Yes,
Please,
thank
would you
you.
mind?
And apologies for those reports that I'm gonna miss. So ECRJ, times are changing. The priorities for this upcoming year is to work on engaging the membership that we have. There's some other competition, for lack of a better word, out there of other Jewish early childhood educational organizations. And we want to make sure that we remain current and meaningful. We're also focusing on fundraising because the current model, which is membership based, is not a sustainable model. And we realize, like many nonprofit organizations, we need to look in different opportunities to help support the organization. And additionally, we kind of to my first point is that we need to focus on outward and inward facing visibility. We need to tell our story better and talk about the importance of who we are and why members should join our organization. We've had some challenges. But as mentioned, the budget model is not working, and so we are having financial challenges. And the school memberships, which is a relatively new concept, we have 42 school memberships, and the school memberships are very reasonably priced, and it enables each school staff, the teachers, to participate in the RPB. We currently have 42 school memberships, which is less than half of the number of directors. And this is out of 233 synagogues. So we have work to do in that area. But also on the flip side, we do have 42 schools with many participants. This past year, there was a national study, which was a collaboration of many different Jewish early childhood organizations, federations, JCCs. Bottom line is that our members are underpaid, undercompensated, and that we need to continue advocating.
Underappreciated.
And our educators are overwhelmed. They're tired. We've kind of thought that we could breathe a little bit after dealing with the COVID pandemic for so many years and all that it has caused for more work to do and also for experiences that we've never had to encounter before. And then October 7th came, and that threw a whole nother wrench into what our teachers and our directors have to deal with. Security and safety is such a top priority, and our educators are scared, our families are scared to send their children. So it's a huge focus, and it's causing a lot of stress. Some of the highlights that our school membership is a big one, that we continue to grow and focus on that. We are looking forward to this upcoming conference where we're going to be partnering with ARJE and working together to see what areas we overlap in and where we can build a deeper partnership together. And we also are continuing to collaborate with all other early childhood Jewish organizations to work on education and providing professional development. So our numbers, currently, we have a total membership of 1,356 members. Our teacher broken down, we have 1,157 teachers, and that's due to our 42 school memberships. And I think it's important to note that out of that 1,157 number of our teachers in ECRJ, 172 of them are participating in the RPB. So it's because this is a new phenomenon. Our organization membership model, where we pay a small fee as a school to allow all of our teachers to be members, allowing them to participate in the RPB. So I think that's really our most important number to keep looking at. And overall, we have 259 active ECRJ participants enrolled in the RPB out of the 1,356.
Jill,
Yes.
going to the Fidelity paradigm, how many of your employees or members would you say are survivors rather than thrivers?
It's a good point. Good question. the majority are surviving.
Jill, are there supports that you think the RPB could provide that would be helpful? I mean, you're at one step removed, but at the same time, if there's something that you could conceive that the RPB could do that would be helpful in this process.
Yeah, well, David and Lisa and I were speaking yesterday, and education at their level to understand, because daycare, as you know, has been in crisis across the country, Jewish or not Jewish, and it's very hard to get staffing. And many of our staffers this is their job, this is their bread and butter, and they're making 30,000 a year, 40,000 a year, and they're living on that. And
That's their primary and sole job? Is that a second? career?
yes, primary child care teachers. They're, you know, I'm very proud to say that my school is one of the highest paid in the area, and our child care teachers are making $20 an hour.
It's, I mean, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but I think there's a lot of congregations where they really rely on the income that their early childhood center brings them to support the congregation, but they're not willing to make that investment back in their teaching staff.
True. I'm very proud to say that Temple Emmanuel in Westfield is, and in the last couple of years, I'm so proud to be able to say our lowest paid employee is making $20 an hour. Because just a few years ago, it was $14 an hour. And as we struggle to get employees in the more, and I hate to separate because they're all educators, but those that are working year round, 8-hour, really 9-hour days with a 1-hour unpaid break, they're not making a lot of money. But they are getting the access to this retirement fund, which we need to continue to be very vocal about and help them. Educating the temples. Our temple contributes 3% of their salary every year. So whether they're able to put a few dollars in or not, they're getting something. And but they don't understand what it is, and they're living hand to mouth right now.
So Lisa and Jill and Alice was there as well. Met last night in order to discuss ways in which we can help on the educational front and toss some ideas around. So Stephanie, I'm going to be getting back to you, and we're going to see if we can find some way to make an educational program that's directed towards this particular demographic and is accessible for them.
Jill, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Hi, sorry, thank you. I've in dealing with the early childhood staff in my congregation, I also feel like it's also sometimes a function of them being very young. And there's a whole host of challenge in terms of benefits and dealing with benefits and all kinds of things, pension being one of them. In trying to explain the importance, but I have found oftentimes that that they're a very young group, and we have the same challenge. We're having problems with our leadership and understanding, compensation and trying to attract the right talent. And I'm happy to help also if there's anything I can do, but I've also found that a function of them being very young and having very little information on how all the benefits work and pension and all of that as a whole.
Right, absolutely. And it's important to have younger staff, because many, like myself, directors, we've been doing this a long time, and there's a lot of us that are either retired or about to retire, and we want to obviously sustain.
Gotta fill from the young.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, all right. If there are others, I'd like to move on. Let's stay with education for just a minute, then I want to get into Missy, and then we'll work our way through. So, are there any educators in the room?
Just a few.
Okay,
All right, so for the ARJE, we've had a lot of programming going on and coming up. Back in the fall, after October 7th, the Covenant Foundation gave our executive director a call and said, what do your educators need? What can we do? And they gave us a grant to do a day of learning that we called Hanukkah HaNefesh. An opportunity for refreshing and renewal, and just had in 16 different sites around the country a day of learning that well over 100 educators participated in. And so that was something that a lot of us needed after, after Steve referenced before, none of us got the cheshbon that we were expecting. We have coming up, as Jill said, our joint Yom Hadash, our first ever joint conference together with ECERJ that I know we're all very excited to be playing in the sandbox together. It's created some amazing partnership opportunities. And then a month later, we are doing a joint ARJE and HUC School of Education Alumni Association mission to Israel. So we'll be taking 20 to 25 educators on a mission to be on the ground and just volunteer and learn from everything that's going on. As far as our priorities this year, we are working on member recruitment. There are well over 100 URJ congregations whose educator is not a member of ARJE, which we know also means they're not able to take advantage of RPB as well. So we are working out on reaching out to those educators and those congregations. At the same time, we're about to start a needs assessment of our members that we're working with a consultant for over the last number of years as we've expanded from NATE, National Association of Temple Educators, to Association of Reformed Jewish Educators. Beyond the congregational educators, we have camp professionals, we have communal organization educators, all kinds of professionals, and we want to make sure that we are meeting everybody's needs, not just the congregational educators. We are also working to partner with HUC to figure things out going forward. The college recently announced the sunsetting of the residential school of education program, which makes sense given how few students there have been recently. And while the executive master's program is really thriving, we are also working with HUC to make sure that there are educational opportunities for emerging career professionals, as well as for the many clergy who are interested in doing the education masters as well. So we are working to partner with them on that. And then we are also working, similar to what Jill said, on being able to tell our story and working on a piece for giving. And though our fundraising has really improved over the last 5 years, there's always more to do. And so we're working on that as well. As far as membership, we have about 550 members, primary, secondary, retired, all of those. As far as whether we're surviving or thriving, I think you would find a higher percentage that are thriving than ECERJ, but I think a lot of that has to do with that many of us are compensated better for what we do than many of the ECERJ professionals, especially their teachers. But there's also still challenges in that a lot of the times in congregational budgeting, the educators' salary and benefits are folded into the religious school budget, and we're finding that some of our members are having to choose, can they buy pizza for their teenagers on Sunday, or can they go to the conference? And so the benefits for educators are maybe just not prioritized in the same way that benefits for others might be. So that's a trend that we are seeing and trying to help our educators advocate for what they deserve.
Well done. Well done. If you don't mind, we have one more going, then I want to get into our settlers, if that's okay. Nita?
Sure, that's me. Sorry, I can't be with you guys. We are working on a few small things at NADA. We just had a really great conference with about 186 members in Charlotte. We have about 400 members total. Some of those people are affiliate members from other organizations, some sitting around this table, and some from our partners in the at NASE, our conservative partners, executive directors. We are working on rethinking our whole professional development portfolio, what we're offering to our members based on what we're hearing that they need from us, what professional development means, what kind of educational programming we can be offering. In addition to rethinking as sort of a global view of the organization, our leadership development, what it means to be a senior member, what our certification, the fellow in temple administration means. And so we're literally rethinking all of that from soup to nuts. And I'm sorry, Anita couldn't join us. Her mom isn't well. She is chairing our sort of governance project last year. And this year, we just clarified our bylaws and made some changes to our bylaws in addition to our operating procedures. And this coming year, we're going to concentrate on roles and responsibilities, roles of professional staff versus lay leaders, and charters for all of our committees. So I think we're getting to a place where we just need to clarify what we're offering and make sure that we are really listening to what our members need from us.
Well done.
Amy?
Yeah.
It's Michael. If you want, happy for you to take, our RPB's governance policies as a framework for maybe building out your own,
That would be great. Thank you.
we put a tremendous amount in, and I think it's one of our major accomplishments that we've had as we built it and rebuilt it. So, just as a model.
Yeah, I would appreciate that. Thank you. Yes, please.
Right.
That would be great. Thank you.
Very good. Missy? What are good things are?
The URJ continues to struggle with a lot of the issues that we hear around this table, and as partners, it's not surprising. We just, however, completed our 150th anniversary event in Washington, D.C., which was held over 3 days last weekend, plus an additional day for an Israel debrief. It was attended by almost 1,000 people across the movement. Synagogue leaders, the URJ affiliate leaders. It was an extraordinary gathering. It is not biennial. It was not meant to replace the biennial. It was meant to be a sort of new direction for how we might gather. And we didn't know how it would go. There was a tremendous amount of planning that went into it. But what it showed is that there's incredible commitment and devotion that continues for our reform movement, for our reform movement organizations and our congregations. There is tremendous momentum in that people are anxious to get to work, get their hands dirty, bring in more people in terms of working toward our goals. And many leaders asked, so this is amazing, can we start the biennial again? So in case you're thinking of that question, I would suggest, again, I'm not the arbiter of this decision, but I would suggest that that is not a direction we will go back to. The size and cost and investment involved in putting on a biennial every 2 years was exorbitant. It was extraordinarily exorbitant. The event last weekend was not inexpensive, but it created an environment for what I will call leadership inspiration, incubation, education. So we will continue to talk about sort of what's next and what becomes the way we gather. There was also an extra day added for an Israel debrief. No one around this table and screen are exempt from knowledge and absolute pain over what is happening in Israel. So it was very important that the added day, the day be added so that there could be focused conversation and learning and sharing about our feelings and plans for Israel. for supporting Israel. The other thing that I will share, which really impacts our work, I think, is that the URJ has been working with a few companies, a cluster of companies that provide payroll administration, benefits administration. And what's important about this is that we are, not only is the URJ moving its year-round staff to benefits administration and payroll administration with this company Insperity, but we are working with JHR and High Five, which are two partner companies that will, we signed, an MOU with them for them to be able to provide benefits administration, HR administration, and payroll administration to congregations. And this is responding to the very loud need from NADA, expressed by NADA, executive directors of large congregations, small congregations. There is so much work in the world of HR and benefits and payroll administration that they need help in order to really manage all of the changing rules and laws and administration requirements. So these companies effectively are able to not only assist congregations with year-round staff, but interestingly, for conversations we've had around this table, we've talked about the part-time religious school teacher or the part-time ECE teacher, or even a rabbi who's working a few different gigs, or a cantorial soloist who works in a few different places. This combination of companies work together so that High Five is a talent compilation, so people can seek other jobs within the movement, other gig jobs like that, and those positions can be consolidated to create one full-time status, hence they can get benefits.
I thought that clergy were excluded from us.
I don't recall. No, they're not. We've resolved the issue.
Maybe on the cantoral bar mitzvah tutoring, but I think we need to continue.
So we just, I just got an email that they have said that they will be able to work with clergy in the 1099 status. So we have to work that out. So I will pull back on the claim that the clergy are included in this, but I will say for all of those synagogue workers, many of whom are part-time and have no ability to get benefits, this offers an incredible opportunity for them not only to gain additional employment in other places, but to consolidate that so that they are eligible for benefits. And thanks to Alice and Michael, and especially Eric, we have worked with them on the contract to ensure that that working under a co-employer or an EOR, employer of record relationship, would not make them uneligible for RPB or retirement plans, nonprofit retirement plans. So it's been a lot of people involved in a lot of problem solving over a long time to make this happen, but we're very excited about the prospect of this.
One thing, synagogue that I'm currently president of, we have 937 families on the roll. We have farmed out our payroll and other bookkeeping services. It's not clear yet in my mind whether it's money efficient, but it certainly gives the executive director a lot more ability to function.
More oxygen. Do they do your benefits?
Pardon me,
Do
please?
they do your benefits as well?
The answer.
Because that's where the
I don't,
savings
yes.
comes in.
I know they do some of it. I don't want to get too deeply involved. I'm just saying, we're using outsourcing. I'm just mentioning that as a fact. And I just don't want to say I don't know if it's money good or not, but it definitely is time good.
Certainly it's time good if you outsource, whether it's to Insperity or to another company, and they take on your benefits.
I think they, and I believe they do.
An enormous savings.
And we do
It's
it
the
through,
combination.
we do it through our accounting firm. Okay, who's gonna speak for the CCAR, may I ask?
I am, thank you, and Hera will chime in as I forget stuff. So we, like everybody else, had a big, I wouldn't say a change in our focus, but a change in our activity post October 11th, post October 7th, doing a lot of work with our Israeli colleagues, seeing what they needed and how we could help them and support them, including providing some short-term counseling for them, providing some much-needed funds for them, launching a campaign for our American colleagues to become friends of Maram, and provide them with some money, and then providing resources for our members here, trying to teach and learn about the crisis, both in terms of how to talk about it and kind of things they were undergoing personally. So that has been a big focus of what we've been doing for the last few months. Hera and I were in Israel right before Thanksgiving with some leaders from the CCR, and she's leading a trip in the end of January, beginning of February, that is oversubscribed, which is sad that not all our colleagues can go, but wonderful that so many people want to be able to travel with us. A few other things I'll mention that are happening in the CCAR. We created a new mission and core strategies about a year ago under Lewis's leadership. Our mission is to support and strengthen Reform rabbis so that they, their communities, and Reform Jewish values thrive. So really focusing on how we can support Reform rabbis so that they can go out and do all of the work that we are doing in the world. We have, I think, the biggest news, which I don't know, have you talked about this yet? That we are exploring, we are in process, we're not exploring, in process of creating a new Torah commentary, which is very, very exciting and a multi-year project. I'm going to let Hera say a few more words about that because she is more eloquent, but this is going to be, it's going to be big and it's very exciting. And I'll say we just finished a pilot with 90, is that right, congregations? And I piloted 3. It's a new translation by Janet and Shelley Martyr, and I piloted with my congregation, and people are absolutely in love with this really beautiful text. So it's going to be a few years until it's out in the pews, but it's very exciting. So I'll let Hera say a few words about that.
Got a savings account set up?
Yes. It is an expensive project.
Yeah, thank you, Erica. It's a really, really exciting project, and it's definitely the biggest project we're working on overall for the next bunch of years. So it's an incredibly ambitious project because it is both a new translation and a new commentary. The Plout commentary that we all love is going to be reaching 50 years old shortly. And it's just, there's been so much new scholarship and you know, new perspectives on how we access Torah text and how we teach Torah text. So, and the Reform movement has never had its own translation of the whole Torah. So we think it's time to do this. We're really excited about doing it. Janet and Shelley Martyr, under the supervision of some scholars, are working on the translation. They're also the people who translated Mishkan and Nefesh. So they have a really beautiful sense of language and Hebrew rhythm and poetry and all of that. We have chosen the 2 editors for the project, who are Elsie Stern from RRC and Daniel Fisher-Livney from HUC. So they're the chief editor and associate editor. So we're really, the translation has been, they've been working on the translation for a few years, but the rest of it is just getting started now. And it's just really, it's really exciting. It's the thing that even in the midst of, you know, kind of these dark times that we've been in, the thing that is really bringing me some joy. And as Erica said, we have about 90 congregations piloting right now, which means hundreds of people giving us feedback. And overall, you know, and there are little things here and there, but overall the reaction has been incredibly positive. And we are really super, super excited about the project, committed to it. There's a lot of work to be done and lots of money to be raised, but yeah, it's really, really exciting. And I hope that in the next, you know, 2 to 3 years, you'll all get to see pieces of it as we begin to kind of roll out samples. We're not there yet, but that's the goal. And I hope you'll all be as excited about it as we are. And I should also just say, you know, the women's commentary was like my baby, you know, in many ways, but that too, at this point, is 15 years old. So, you know, we need a new commentary. It's time. And one last thing, and I'll hand you back to Erica. The women's commentary is actually not the poetry pieces and not the translation, because we don't own that translation, but the commentary, the pieces of the commentary itself, for those of you familiar with the book, is about to be rolled out on Safaria. So there will now be a huge cache of women's voices and perspectives available on Safaria. We're really pleased with that partnership, really excited about it. Thanks.
Awesome. That's the first time I'm hearing that. That's really exciting, Hera. So yeah, we're really excited. More news to come as we continue with this multi-year project, but I think it's going to be incredible. I'll just say a few other things in terms of what we're working on. We had a 2-year ethics task force that did a comprehensive review of our ethics system, and we are now in the process of doing some rewriting of our code and procedures. We have done quite a bit of that, but we are doing even more, and that will come before the conference for a vote in June, just to make our system better and more efficient. And as part of that work, we also have a retiree successor working group that we launched to look at the transition as people transition out of congregational life and new rabbis transition in. That has been a tension point for some of our members, so seeing what we can do to help make that transition easier. And we are meeting in Philadelphia in March of 2024 for our convention. Looking forward to being in person again together stateside. You are all welcome to join us. I know Michael's coming down. I think some of the other staff might be coming down, but we're really looking forward to that.
Take the bus.
You can take the bus. I don't necessarily recommend it, but it is an option for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other may we ask any comments of any of the reports that have been given or questions? Are you gonna have a payment plan on this commentary you're putting up? David mentioned in his congregation, where they have 2,000 members. I think you were selling for what, $250 a piece, right?
Well, I assume it's gonna be an expensive book, and you know, a congregation like Holy Blossom could spend $500,000 on it, I guess.
I could be
Yeah,
looking
I
at
don't
250.
think. Well, unlike prayer books, you don't need to buy one for every person in the congregation. So there will be.
Depending on your congregation.
I mean, please, that's great. But there will be a pre-order discount the same way we've done for all the new prayer books that we've put out. And, you know, there'll be
We're gonna
plans.
ask for more. There you go.
But wait, there's more.
Yeah, wait. We get a fountain pen along with it.
You now have a budget.
And free shipping. We get free
Number of
shipping.
years to save up so that you have the money by the time it is available.
We thank you for suggesting that. The Adler Fund ain't up for it. Okay, thank you very much. Seriously, are there any questions we could ask for clarification? Having said that, we're about to enter our final executive committee meeting of 2023. So I'm going to ask that the staff, first of all, I want to say personally, thank you very, very much in front of everybody. I'm going to start getting goopy again, but Alice is on her way to Dubai. Don't tell them you work for us. It'll help. And we wish you well. To say the least, please get back safe. You're just so important to us. And for those who are, what did I think Daryl called it, the COVID crud or the conference crud or something?
The CRUD 150.
Yeah, crud, yeah, crud 150. And for those who are ill, please get better. We need you and we need you badly. Having said that, Stephanie, you're on vacation. I'll be talking to you a little bit later and hope all is well. Thank you all for attending. I'm going to ask the executive committee to excuse themselves if they might.
All right, staff's gonna step out. Len, call me when you want me to come back.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.